While the president is also facing off with Walmart after the country's largest retailer warned last week it would have to raise prices because of Trump's tariffs. Trump took to social media, writing in part this: Walmart should stop trying to blame tariffs as the reason for raising prices. And that between the company and China, they should, as is said, eat the tariffs and not charge valued customers anything. In that same Meet the Press interview, Secretary Bessent said he spoke with the CEO of Walmart and that the company will indeed eat some of those tariffs. So for more, let's bring in the co-anchor of CNBC's Squawk Box and, of course, the New York Times columnist, Andrew Ross Sorkin. Andrew, good to see you this morning. Let's talk about these tariffs, because it wasn't that long ago where President Trump was talking about how this was sort of going to be an economic panacea. This was going to bring in money, for this nation, and no one would, feel any ill effects. Here he is, flat out saying that prices are going to, prices could rise, but suggesting that it should be Walmart who eats it rather than your average American.
Look, it's a tax. It's a tax on the American people. I don't even know how many more times we need to say that part of it. I think the bigger question now is just what kind of political pressure there is going to be on businesses to eat some of those costs, and what kind of political pressure there will otherwise be if they don't. It's interesting to see this White House, a Republican White House, go after businesses in this way. The Wall Street Journal, by the way, in their editorial page this morning, saying he goes, this is he as in Donald Trump, he goes full Kamala Harris in demanding that the retail giant not raise prices. That's something, frankly, that we have seen from Democrats over the years, especially during the pandemic and other times, where they have effectively said that corporations were trying to gouge customers and trying to use their leverage to do that. The interesting part here is, and we saw it, by the way, with the Trump administration just 2 weeks ago as it related to Amazon, when there was some floating, frankly, of misinformation about Amazon potentially being transparent about if prices went up, what kind of the raise would be sort of described as effectively a tariff raise. And if Trump effectively comes after a Walmart, comes after an Amazon, and actually starts to tell his followers, if you will, don't shop there, shop here, shop there, that's, I think, where this could get a lot more complicated for a lot of these business leaders.
Andrew, the political sort of macro view of this, I want to turn to the Wall Street Journal's editorial board, which points out something that I think might be obvious to anybody who knows what a fundamental definition of traditional Marxism, traditional communism, socialism might be, which is that the president of the United States is using the executive branch to tell companies how to run their businesses. Politically speaking, is this just a level of numbness that people just expect now, this walking, talking contradiction, or is there something deeper here in what the Wall Street Journal is pointing out?
I don't know if it's deeper. I think what's most interesting is that it's coming from the Republican side of the political world, insofar as it is very true that, President Biden in the past, President Obama, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, you can name the folks on the left who historically have taken businesses to task over pricing. And that's not a new phenomenon. Typically, though, when they did it, they didn't always name names this way. They often talked about some of these companies in a sort of broader context. I think by really taking aim directly at a Walmart, by the way, just last week, he took aim, meaning President Trump took aim at Tim Cook at Apple for manufacturing or potentially manufacturing things in India. So I think that's where this gets super complicated, because he does have a rabid following, and he can turn that rabid following for or against a particular business. You can go back and think about what happened to Target after some of the LGBT sales items that they had for sale, and just sort of how quickly the political world turned, or the Republican world in particular, turned against Target. Same thing happened with Budweiser. And so when you have a powerful voice out there that's coming from the White House talking either positively or negatively about a specific company, boy, that is new. That is new.
The term 86, is used in the restaurant context and has been put on, T-shirts against previous presidents. And throughout my career, I've never heard 86 be used for any type of intent to kill or assassinate someone.
Importantly, that was former CIA Director John Brennan on this program saying in his career he has never heard of the term 86 being used as a threat to anyone's life. He was, of course, talking about the now deleted Instagram post from former FBI Director Jim Comey. It's a photo of shells on a beach with the message that spells out 8647. It drew immediate accusations from Trump allies that Comey was calling for violence against the 47th president. Now, we did a little bit of research, and 86 is a term that originated in the restaurant industry. In fact, at an historic New York establishment, Chumley's, according to a profile in The New Yorker, Chumley's is, quote, the birthplace of the term 86th, derived from the back door at 86 Bedford Street, through which patrons were advised to skedaddle when the police were en route. Now, in politics, more recently, it's been used as a message of resistance. Matt Gaetz, remember him? He was Trump's first pick to be the country's attorney general. Well, that would-be attorney general posted last year on social media this, quote, we've now 86'd McCarthy, McDaniel, McConnell. Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer appeared in an interview during the 2020 campaign with 8645 displayed behind her on a pin. It's been deployed by Republican politicians and Democratic politicians alike. But the former FBI director's use of the term 86 has sparked something totally different, totally new, unprecedented, an investigation by the Trump administration into him and it. Since we first reported on this story on Friday, Comey was interviewed by the U.S. Secret Service. He appeared voluntarily at the Washington field office. The reason why Comey is facing a criminal investigation, we believe, from what we've seen publicly, is because of this accusation from Trump that's been echoed by his cabinet widely and publicly.
He knew exactly what that meant. A child knows what that meant. If you're the FBI director and you don't know what that meant assassination. And it says it loud and clear.
Joining us now, former FBI Director Jim Comey. He's also the author of a new legal thriller, FDR Drive, a crime novel. It's out tomorrow, and we'll get to that. But we start here. You are back in the middle of a political firestorm.
Yeah, for walking on the beach with my wife. So I don't know how we ended up here. It never occurred to me that it was any kind of controversial thing, but that's the time we live in.
So take me back to the walk on the beach.
We were walking on the beach. We went to the beach to prepare for this week, which was the launch of my book, and to think about the book and to prepare to answer questions about it. And we were walking back towards the road, and we saw in the sand someone had arranged shells with numbers. And Patrice, my wife, said, why would someone put an address in the sand? And I said, I don't know. And we stood over it, and I said, I think it's some kind of like political message. And she said, 86, when I was a server, she did a lot of work in restaurants, meant to remove an item from the menu when you ran out of ingredients. And I said, well, to me, as a kid, it always meant to leave a place, to ditch a place. I said, that's really clever. So then she said, you should take a picture of that. And I did. And I posted it on my Instagram account and thought nothing more of it until I heard through her that people were saying it was some sort of a call for assassination, which is crazy. But I took it down. Even if I think it's crazy, I don't want to be associated with violence of any kind.
And then what happened?
I got a call from the Secret Service that night asking if I would speak to them about it. Of course. I admire the Secret Service. They're pros. I spoke to them on the phone. Then they asked the next day when I got home, would I be willing to come in and meet them in person at the Washington field office, which again I did, and they were pros again.
Between posting the picture and getting a call from the Secret Service, did you have any sort of gut check of like, well, they've audited me in an extraordinary way. I was under investigation for years after he fired me. Like, did you have any regret about posting the picture?
Well, I regret the distraction and the controversy around it. But again, it's hard to have regret about something that even in hindsight looks to me to be totally innocent for the reasons you said. But yeah, I didn't have a gut check. In the Trump era, I've been investigated a lot, audited a lot. And so it's not my first rodeo. I'm in some strange way the relationship he can't get over. Maybe because I've lived a happy, productive life since leaving. But this has just been a distraction in that life.
Tell us about, take us through all of the ways he sought to investigate you. He's been tweeting about investigating you and prosecuting you, I think, since 2017, shortly after he fired you.
I think that's right, and I intentionally don't keep track of these things, but he has, and I hope no one will, but he has dozens of times called for me to be incarcerated and accused me of all manner of things, and I was investigated repeatedly in a variety of different ways in his first term. I went through the mother of all IRS audits, which cost me thousands of dollars, but I got a $347 refund at the end. Turns out I had overpaid my taxes. But just again and again and again, I really thought that I was done. I was in another life. I was a grandfather and an author wearing, sweaters and jeans. And then I went for a walk on the beach and posted a silly picture of shells that I thought was a clever way to express a political viewpoint. And actually, I still think it is. I don't see it the way some people are still saying it is. But again, I don't want any part of any violence. I've never been associated with violence, and so that's why I took it down.
So your position, even after all of this, the Secret Service calling you and bringing you in for questioning, is that the phrase, the message on the shells, was political speech and is political speech?
Yeah, by somebody. I actually didn't think of it as political speech by me, but I thought, what a clever way to express a political view. The shells were the same color for each of the letters, so different colors for the letters. It took a lot of work. Somebody with artistic flair did that, and I have a hard time believing it was anybody with a dark intention, and it certainly was no dark intention on my part, on my spouse's part.
I have to ask you this. I mean, this cabinet is made up of totally different people. There is someone atop the national intelligence communities who said this.
Do you believe Comey should be in jail?
I do. Any other person with the position of influence that he has, people who take very seriously what a guy of his stature, his experience, and what the propaganda media has built him up to be, I'm very concerned for the president's life. We've already seen assassination attempts. I'm very concerned for his life. And James Comey, in my view, should be held accountable and put behind bars for this.
So she's the head. She sits atop all of the intelligence agencies in this country. And I wonder what you thought and what you think people around the world thought when they saw that.
I hope people know enough about that particular person that they understand where it's coming from. It says something more depressing about the leadership of our current administration. And I just shrug, because that's ridiculous.
Does it make you scared?
No.
Why?
Well, it's not my first rodeo. I would hate something like this, or the audit, or all the investigations, to happen to someone who doesn't have my experience, because I look at it and I think there's another one of those. But when it's one of the real problems we have in this country right now is the use of the president's power aiming at individuals who don't have my background or experience, like a Chris Krebs or any others that have been targeted, law firms being targeted. This is a real problem that people should not look past. My thing, to me, and I hope to everybody else, is just a distraction that goes away in a weekend, but there's something much more important going on here. The use of power to aim at individuals eroding the rule of law.
So that was the top of the country's intelligence agency. She sits atop the head of the CIA and the NSA. The person who sits atop the Department of Justice, Pam Bondi, has really refused to do any of Trump's political bidding. Do you worry that the last time you were sort of harassed, people like Bill Barr and Rod Rosenstein were there, and now it's Pam Bondi plus basically everyone who's defended Donald Trump in a criminal context over the last 4 years?
Yes, a very different crew. The last group had people who were flexible but had some institutionalist principles. They all ran for the hills, as you would expect after January 6th, and now it's Four Seasons total landscaping all the way down. So you don't have people who are interested in standing up for institutional values. They work for the president, and that's concerning. It's actually short-sighted for a president to have people around him like that, because he can't look to an institution if the American people start worrying about a set of facts and say they'll handle it in a fair way, because he's made clear now they're all his people.
Do you worry that his people will not treat you fairly now that you're under scrutiny?
Sure, but we live in a reality-based world where people, if they're going to make accusations, have to make them in front of judges, have to put evidence forward, have to swear that things are true. I believe in our judiciary. I believe in that one remaining leg of our three-legged stool. That independent judiciary is alive and well and gives me great comfort.
Is that what you think will backstop whatever comes at you from the Trump Justice Department?
Sure. I wouldn't expect anything to come at me from the shell business, but anything that did come at me, if I get more audits, more investigations, yes. Our saving grace, we still have a leg on our stool. If we lose that, I don't know where we are, but we have judges appointed by all different presidents of different parties who believe in the rule of law. And if you come into their courtroom, heaven help you if you're not telling the truth. That still exists in this country and should be a source of great comfort.
Okay, on Friday night, you might have seen the Washington Post publish this headline. Trump Justice Department considers removing key check on lawmaker prosecutions. The Post reporting on a proposal inside the Justice Department to make it so federal prosecutors across the country could indict sitting members of Congress without getting approval from lawyers in Maine Justice's public integrity section. So any random U.S. attorney anywhere in the country could indict a sitting member of Congress on their own say-so without even needing to run it by anyone in Washington. That story broke on Friday, and it's obviously a big deal, right? One of the reasons the public integrity section exists at DOJ is to prevent prosecutors from bringing politically motivated charges. With this change, prosecutors could indict members of Congress on their own with no oversight and no check against politically motivated prosecutions. But like I said, as of Friday, the Washington Post was just reporting this as a proposal. Well, now tonight, we got this news. I mentioned it at the very top of the show. 2 weeks ago, Democratic mayor of Newark, New Jersey, Mayor Ras Baraka, was arrested by shambolic, unprofessional, very obviously out of their depth, masked Homeland Security officers while the mayor was protesting outside of an ICE detention center in his city. At the time, Trump's newly appointed U.S. attorney for New Jersey charged the mayor with one count of trespassing. Tonight, that U.S. attorney, her name is Alina Habba. She's one of Trump's old defense lawyers. Before that, she represented parking garage companies. Tonight, she dropped the case against Mayor Ras Baraka, but then she brought a new charge against a Democratic member of Congress. Congresswoman LaMonica McIver was with Mayor Baraka at the ICE detention center when he was arrested. Alina Habba has now charged Congresswoman McIver with assault, claiming that she assaulted, impeded, and interfered with law enforcement at the ICE facility. Congresswoman McIver has responded with this statement, quote, "Earlier this month, I joined my colleagues to inspect the treatment of ICE detainees at Delaney Hall in my district. We were fulfilling our lawful oversight responsibilities as members of Congress have done many times before. The charges against me are purely political. They mischaracterize and distort my actions. They are meant to criminalize and deter legislative oversight." And indeed, federal law explicitly protects the rights of members of Congress to inspect federal detention centers for immigrants, even with zero notice that they are doing so. Now, this story only just broke. We reached out to Alina Habba's office, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the state of New Jersey, to ask if they got approval from the public integrity section at Maine Justice for these charges they have now brought against a sitting congresswoman. We have yet to hear back. We'll let you know when we do.
I want to bring in NBC's Yamiche Alcindor, who's covering the White House. Peter Baker is the New York Times chief White House correspondent and an MSNBC political analyst. Michael Crowley is also with the Times and covers the State Department and U.S. foreign policy. So, Yamiche, what do we know about this call and what the president is wanting here?
Well, the big question is, how long is this call going to go? From our understanding, the call is underway. We haven't gotten any information from the White House that the call has ended. So this could be a very long call between these two leaders. Now, President Trump has really raised the stakes here. He said that nothing could happen when it came to these peace talks to try to end this war between Russia and Ukraine unless he and Vladimir Putin spoke directly. So that is now happening. We also have heard from White House officials and top Trump aides that the two at some point might be getting together in person. We know, of course, that the president is also planning to speak separately with the president of Ukraine as well as NATO leaders later on today. So also watching to see what happens there. Our understanding is that European leaders are pushing for a 30-day unconditional ceasefire. We're not sure if President Putin is going to agree to that. President Trump is saying that he wants a complete end to what he's calling a bloodbath. The other thing that's interesting here is that even after we saw that disastrous Oval Office spray between President Trump and the president of Ukraine, where President Trump said that he was disrespectful and said that he didn't want to end the war, we've now seen President Trump sort of take a sharper tone actually against Russia, something that he hasn't done in the past, saying that he might have sanctions against them. So it's going to be very interesting to see what the president says after this call ends and sort of what is the next step here, because there's a lot riding on this. I should also note that the vice president is out just today in the last few hours in Italy saying that if the U.S. doesn't see enough progress, that they could walk away altogether. That, of course, would be really, really hard for Ukraine. So a lot riding on this call, and definitely something that we're continuing to report on. Chris.
So, Michael, the president has been pushing for an end to this war for months. It hasn't happened, obviously. So why should we think that it will be different this time? What are the, I guess, circumstances surrounding it that might make it possible to happen?
Oh, I don't think we should think that it will be different this time fundamentally, substantively. You know, something I will be looking for is whether Vladimir Putin plays this in a clever way, which is to give Trump something in this call where Trump can walk away and say that he's gotten a concession and that they're making progress, but something that doesn't actually box Putin in. I mean, it's clear at this point that Putin thinks he has an upper hand and wants to continue the war. And does not want to do the kind of comprehensive deal that Trump is looking for. But at the same time, despite these increasing threats from the White House, just given everything we know about Trump going back for a decade now, it's very difficult to imagine Trump confronting Putin or escalating pressure against him. You really get a sense that Trump wants to be in Putin's good graces. So I think Trump, based on what we know, will be very eager to take anything from Putin, maybe some kind of a partial brief ceasefire like we saw the Russians agree to weeks ago, something very limited and partial, and say that he's making progress and essentially kick the can down the road. That would be one very likely scenario to me. The one last thing I would say here is I think the biggest question is that if Putin proves more intransigent than that and he doesn't give anything, you hear administration officials talk about walking away from this process. And the question is, does walking away mean just no longer trying to mediate a peace agreement, or does it mean walking away from everything, including support for Ukraine, which would be a de facto huge victory for Russia if America is not going to resume support for Ukraine? So that's the giant question looming in the background here.
Peter, I want to play part of what the Vice President, J.D. Vance, had to say about all of this just this morning.
Look, I think one open question is Vladimir Putin serious about negotiating peace, right? He has made some concessions. He has taken some serious steps in these conversations, but we feel like, you know, we're at a point where we're hitting an impasse, and that's why the president is talking to him on the phone. Yeah, I think, honestly, that President Putin, he doesn't quite know how to get out of the war.
So he doesn't know how to get out of the war, Peter, and also suggests he doesn't have a strategy. Do you think Putin is under any pressure? What is the pressure the White House thinks it has to bring to bear?
Well, I think actually very few people think that Putin is serious about ending the war at this point. There doesn't seem to be any evidence of that. He seems to think he has the upper hand. He has bragged that he is making progress on the battlefield, exaggerating what's actually happening there, of course. And as Michael just rightly pointed out, if the alternative to a peace deal that he doesn't want is the United States walks away from Ukraine, that is, as Michael said, a victory, because it means that they no longer have to worry about United States arms, and most importantly, they don't have to worry about United States intelligence, which has been crucial to helping the Ukrainians target and fend off Russian forces. So, you know, Putin looks at this as a win-win, I think, at this point. Now, you know, it's interesting to hear Trump and his people express frustration with Putin. That hasn't been something they've done a lot over the last 10 years. Trump is such an admirer of Putin over the years, called him a genius, called him very savvy, expressed so much admiration of him. Today, Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, said that the president is frustrated with both sides, meaning the Russians and the Ukrainians. From the Ukrainian point of view, if these talks are going to collapse, the important thing for them is to make sure that Putin gets the blame, or at least as much of the blame as they can muster, because they don't want Trump to back away, and they don't want Trump to say, to wipe his hands and say pox on both their houses.
You mentioned what Caroline Leavitt had to say, that he's frustrated, and I think she also said he is weary. What does history tell us about Donald Trump's stick-to-itiveness over the course of a long period of time with a difficult, sophisticated problem? If weariness is setting in, what does that mean for the long term, especially if you're President Zelensky?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you mentioned this. President Trump overestimated his ability to solve this war. He told people time and time again last year on the campaign trail that he would end the war within 24 hours, he said. In fact, it would be so easy, he would do it even before he was sworn in as president. Of course, that didn't happen. And his tolerance for long, drawn-out negotiations, which unfortunately are in fact, common in international relations, is pretty thin. And if he decides, this isn't working, I'm going to move on to something else, he tends to sort of shift his attention to whatever the next shiny bauble might be. He's feeling more confident right now about his negotiations with Iran to make a nuclear deal, and he might just, in fact, put his energies there and say, that's my big diplomatic victory of the year. That'll be what gets me a nuclear peace prize, and forget Ukraine. So it wouldn't surprise me if he does lose interest. That happens a lot with him.
Yeah, the Nobel is something we know that he would love to have. Michael, I want to play part of what Trump's Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, said yesterday about today's call.
The president has a force of personality that is unmatched. I think it's important. His sensibilities are that he's got to get on the phone with President Putin, and that is going to clear up some of the logjam and get us to the place that we need to get to.
So, Michael, roll call did account. They say Trump claimed 53 different times on the campaign trail he could end the war in Ukraine in less than 24 hours. And a lot of it does seem to be based on that confidence. We just heard from Witkoff that the president has an unmatched force of personality. We know personal relationships do play an important role in diplomacy, but have they put too many eggs in that basket? What do we know really about the relationship between those two leaders?
Well, we know that publicly it's a relationship where Trump seems to be the suitor who flatters Vladimir Putin, who courts him and craves his respect. I mean, this goes all the way back to I was revisiting recently when Trump owned the Miss Universe beauty pageant and brought it to Moscow in 2015, I believe, maybe a year or two earlier than that. And he was tweeting at the time, I'm going to be going to Moscow with my beauty pageant. Do you think Vladimir Putin will meet with me? Do you think he will be my best friend? I mean, literally, he said, do you think he will be my best friend? That kind of set the tone for this relationship where Trump is the supplicant. Now, at the same time, it's shrouded in a certain amount of mystery. They have phone calls. We don't know all the details. There are times when the White House won't confirm or deny that there were conversations, or the Trump transition after the election. They weren't very clear about whether they were talking or not. So there's a level of mystery here. But ultimately, I would say two things. One, Trump's force of personality has failed before. Remember when he tried to get a nuclear deal with Kim Jong-un? His force of personality got Kim out to do some spectacular photo ops with the president and sort of normalize and legitimize his image. But they totally failed to make any progress on a real deal. And number two, Vladimir Putin has been president of Russia now for something like 25 years. He was a former KGB intelligence operative. This is not a guy who you're just going to kind of fast talk into something. So I'm just very skeptical of those claims.
Well, I had completely forgotten about the Miss Universe comments, and I think it's very telling and a reminder to all of us how consistent Donald Trump has been across many, many decades. Yamiche Alcindor, thank you. Peter Baker and Michael Crowley, you're staying with me.
Joining us now, political strategist Lucy Caldwell. She served as campaign manager for Joe Walsh in the 2020 Republican presidential primary. Welcome.
Let them eat tariffs.
Let them eat tariffs.
It's like his own Marie Antoinette moment, isn't it?
Yes.
Really is. the Walmart debacle. And to be clear, Walmart is just who we're talking about because that's who the White House has decided to single out here on this, because they did speak up on their earnings call and say, do not be surprised. We're going to have to end up passing some of these costs on to you all. And as a economic reporter cautioned me the other day, they said, well, they don't have to, but they have a responsibility to the shareholders, so they're choosing to. Here's my thing. Are Republicans not concerned that you have the president of the United States trying to tell the companies what to do, the CEOs? Like, it feels a little communist-esque to me.
Yes, it's a little kind of, it's a bit kind of command and control. It's not so free enterprise.
I don't know.
Yeah, it is. It's giving a bit of socialism. It's interesting. I was thinking about his attitude toward the Walmart CEO and his attitude towards CEOs in general in industry. And I was thinking today about how we've had such a shift in our economy where so many of the people that we think of as like the titans of industry or big American companies don't actually sell widgets, right? It's like tech companies, right? So it's Zuckerberg or, it's OpenAI, whatever. But we don't eat cans of Instagram soup, right? We don't lay our head down on Facebook pillows or we don't drive OpenAI cars, right? And ultimately, we all still have to feed our families. We have to supply the things that make our home run, make our businesses run. And so really, I think Trump is putting himself where he's up against a wall in just ignoring the very fact that, look, there is supply and demand, right? Demand for food, for affordable groceries at Walmart is not going down. And let them eat tariffs, that is not going to work. And it's going to show up electorally a lot sooner than he thinks.
A can of Instagram soup feels like some millennial dystopia.
It does.
But there's the issue here that he is still, and this is the thing he does, he's claiming it all as a win. And he can't seem to decide if this is his economy on the days that it is good or Joe Biden's economy on the days that it's bad. This from Politico, I think, sort of summed it up. The White House is indiscriminate about what announcement it claims come from the Trump effect. Some have been in the works for years. Simone, you were referencing that. Others are in line with what the company would have invested regardless of the tariffs. Some are inflating, adding previous investments to new pledges. So he has lost, and yet he is going to take a victory lap. Politically, how do you contend with that mixed messaging?
Well, I really think that we have to blame some of our media institutions and people who are letting him do this narrative, right? If we're going to focus in on millennials, we will have no hot tariff summer, right? We have got to cut him off at the bend, because what happens is that we're in this cycle where, and by the way, Donald Trump's economic policy has been like the biggest gift to meme makers that there ever was, right? Because we've all seen the meme of like the guy and he's pressing the button, like does something bad, rolls it back, does a good thing, does the bad thing, right? So, but we're now getting socialized, and it's not funny, right? This is how authoritarians normalize people to their insanity.
And incompetence.
Exactly. We're socialized to the idea like, oh, actually, it's okay because he paused the China tariffs. So now the economy is recovering from the burst. Or, oh, actually, we do have supplies coming into the LA port. We have supplies coming in because companies are bracing to be able to make sure that they get supply in, as we just heard. And so we have to stop doing that. We have to stop ever praising him for this. We have to stop letting Scott Bessent, a person who knows better, go on and claim that this is some masterful art of the deal. We have to all collectively participate in ending that kind of narrative, that there is somehow an art to this and that somehow we should praise him when he rolls it back. It is all chaos, and it is an authoritarian playbook, quite frankly.
Look at Michael's face. What is this face?
No, this face is just
thinking about the rompers.
Thinking about the rompers.
No rompers this summer, ladies.
No rompers this summer. No,
get to Dara quickly.
I mean, Lucy just struck a chord with me. I'm just pissed off at the level of just the way the press talks about this in large measure, the way our politicians kowtow to it. Families are going to be hurt. They're going to feel the impact of this in a real way. And there's no amount of slimy, slithering Trump BS that's going to offset that. Because at the end of the day, this is his economy. It's not Joe Biden. Mm-hmm. God bless you, Joe, by the way, right? But this is not his economy now. Everything that's happening since January 20th is because this president decided to turn that screw. And what makes it worse and more galling to me is the fact that there are Republicans on Capitol Hill who sit back in their little desks on the floor or in their little committee chambers, and they just let this happen without any response, without any care about the fact that it is their constituencies from Alabama to Mississippi to New York to wherever who are directly impacted by this, one. But more importantly, or just as important, the lack of a philosophical mooring anymore to anything that makes the least amount of sense when it comes to economic policy.
Can we actually put a pin in that and just to underscore everything you're saying, take a listen to Senator Hagerty and what he had to say about Walmart's prices?
If Walmart decides that they have to raise their prices, do you think that that's un-American effectively?
I think Walmart's going to have to make this decision, but Walmart has the broadest base of American clients there is, and I think they're going to be very careful about how they do this. I know that they've received some criticism from the president. I think they need to think hard.
What the hell do they have to think about?
Yeah, I mean, this is also so classic Trump, right? Because Trump, when he ran in 2016, he was on stage with Hillary Clinton in a debate, and she was like, this guy doesn't pay his taxes. This guy doesn't, he's like price gouging people at his apartment building.
He bankrupted a casino.
That makes me smart. That makes me smart, right? I'm a hard driving businessman. That makes me smart. And now Walmart, as you say, a company with really very, very tight margins, is like, these are prices that are going to have to get passed on to consumers. And Donald Trump is aghast at this. And the only member of the Senate who is actually staying at all true to fiscal conservatism, to the stuff that you and I were once part of a tradition around, is Rand Paul. Like,
right.
What bizarre world are we in that Rand Paul is the lone voice of some sanity in the Republican Party?
Yes, he's the lone person speaking up, which I do think is, I don't know if it's the chilling effect or if people think, and by people I mean Republican senators and Republican members of Congress in the House, think that by going along publicly and maybe quietly pushing back is going to get them something. But even Johnny Walker, Johnny Walker, they make whiskey,
and this is getting
Guinness
serious
beer,
now.
Smirnoff vodka.
This is getting real serious.
They expect a tariff hit.
Of course they do.
Not to mention the tariffs that are still on the EU. That's where champagne comes from, the Champagne region.
And you can see the look on her face.
American products made actually in other countries. Levi jeans, Chevy Silverados, Brock mints,
Kentucky
Gerber
bourbon made in
food.
Kentucky that was bought a lot by people in Canada previously.
But go ahead.
Well, and yet he's going to the G7, and the administration has said don't expect any trade deals.
Of course not. Hold on a second, people, because as someone who used to work at the White House, it really frustrates me that the government is making it seem like you could just, go to lunch, walk out of the trade deal. It doesn't work like that. The way trade deals come together, they are often negotiated
Even if you prep before the lunch.
Even if you prep before the lunch, it will take months on a fast track, sometimes years, but definitely months to make sure all of the deliverables are in line. Every country knows what they're getting out of it. You're going back, making sure everybody's finance people are okay. And then the Congress on America's side underscores it. They are just hobbling these frameworks together. I don't understand, like a happy hour.
If the difference, and this is how you, I think, put it down, Lucy, if the difference between your costs and your ability to make a profit is 3%,
yes,
and I impose a 10% tax on you, let alone a 30 or 140% tax, tell me, where do you make your money?
Yeah. You go out of business.
You go out of business.
You go out of business. And it's not just the product. And look, I spend a lot of time in a truly rural place where Walmart is the grocery store. It is the pharmacy. It is everything, right? And Walmart coming into that town has been the greatest thing, actually, for so many people in that town, right? So this is really going to hurt people. But as you say, Congress, right? But this Congress is abdicating their duty.
Welcome back. This morning, millions of people across the central U.S. are bracing for another round of severe weather after a tornado outbreak this weekend left communities reeling. These sights were all too common. At least 28 people killed in Missouri, Kentucky, and Virginia. Thousands of homes and entire neighborhoods damaged. And right now, an urgent search and rescue mission is underway across multiple states. St. Louis was among the hardest hit areas. A huge tornado there grew up to a mile wide with wind speeds above 140 miles an hour. And joining us now is the mayor of St. Louis, Kara Spencer. Mayor, thank you so much for joining us. You have said this is one of the worst storms in St. Louis history. Where are you seeing the most destruction right now? Can you just describe for us what you've seen?
Well, it has truly been horrific. The scale and the strength of this tornado has been unprecedented. Really, we had winds of up to 100 miles an hour, an 8-mile path of absolute destruction. This is, just to give you some perspective, an unusually long and intense tornado. They're usually just a touchdown or a couple miles. This went and tore through the entirety of North St. Louis here in our city, from the county border all the way through a very, very populated area. We have 5,000 buildings impacted. Thousands of families have been displaced through this. The destruction is truly, truly, truly phenomenal, and just absolutely devastating.
I mean, 5,000 buildings impacted. That's unreal. We know from the National Weather Service that their, at least preliminary investigation, leads them to believe it was an EF3 tornado that hit St. Louis.
It's a high-end. That's right. It's a high-end EF3, possibly EF4. We know that this was just an absolutely just tremendous amount of power, wind, just destruction. We have estimated at this point well over $1 billion of damage throughout our community. And we have had such a tremendous response from the community. Elected officials at the local, state level and the federal level have been on site. Governor Kehoe flew in yesterday morning. Senator Eric Schmidt, everybody here on the local level has been hands on deck. We have had every major construction company in the region are rolling out trucks this morning to clear out debris and really help to make our community safer. Every single city department has been working around the clock since we declared a federal emergency Friday afternoon, a local state of emergency here Friday afternoon, working around the clock, clearing. We have cleared every street. We are talking about miles and miles and miles of streets that were obstructed, trees that had fallen. We had hundreds of utility lines down throughout the community. We don't even have a full account at this point of just how many people are how many wires are continued to be live and dangerous. But the work that our community has done is absolutely incredible. Everybody from the city workers, like I said, have been working around the clock to make our community safer. We went through the fire department, checked every single building in a complex grid throughout the area to ensure that we didn't have further loss of life. We've had, our forestry department, every single department clearing,
Wow.
just to make our community passable at this point.
It just sounds overwhelming, Mayor, with the extent of damage and the numbers that you are describing in terms of homes impacted, people impacted. My understanding is, as far as those lives lost, people ranging in age from 30 to almost 82 years old. So just deep devastation and heartache for your community. It sounds like an enormous recovery effort that's going to take some time. Do you have a sense of what exactly is needed most at this point? And are you getting the help you need, including not only from the regional resources that I know you're pulling in, but from federal as well?
I can tell you that on the local level, every organization, community member, elected official has been on point. What we need right now is federal assistance. This is where FEMA and the federal government has got to come in and help communities. Our city cannot shoulder this alone. The state of Missouri cannot shoulder this alone. We need partners at the national level, at the federal level, to step up and help. And this is not just true for St. Louis. Cities across the nation, when experiencing disasters such as this is what the federal government is for. We need your help. We need the help of the broader community. We have set up a fund to help bring in some funding right off the bat, just to bridge that gap. But we need federal assistance. There is no way.
FEMA there? Is FEMA on the ground yet?
FEMA has not been on the ground. We do not have confirmed assistance from FEMA at this point. I do want to say, however, every other level of government has been on the ground with us, helping in every capacity possible. But when you have a disaster of this scale, 8 miles of just pure destruction. This tornado didn't just touch down and leave. This tornado ripped through our community for a full 8 miles in the city of St. Louis. And this is an area that has needed help, that we need investment. Our North St. Louis has been neglected for a long time, and we need the help of our partners here. We are so grateful for this opportunity to talk to a wider audience here, just to show just how much destruction has happened here and how our community has truly come together at this point. But we can't do it alone.
Mayor Kara Spencer, thank you for taking the time and helping to shine light on what you all are enduring, and best of luck in the road to recovery.
Thank you. And I'll just share, we do have a fund set up if your listeners want to help, stlstormrelief.org. We are taking contributions, and we are welcoming the assistance of partners across the United States at this point. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you again, Mayor. Appreciate it.